When a single father's last attempt at love becomes his most humiliating moment, a stranger's quiet act of kindness doesn't just save his dinner. It changes everything he thought he deserved. If you've ever felt invisible, ever wondered if anyone truly sees your struggle, this story will remind you why one moment of human decency can rewrite an entire life. Stay with me until the end to see how a $50 blind date turned into something nobody saw coming. And before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels, how many of us understand what it means to be seen when we've felt forgotten for so long. Now, let me tell you about Evan Brooks and the night that split his life into before and after. The November wind cut through Boston's streets like a blade made of broken promises, carrying the smell of distant snow and exhaust fumes through the orange glow of streetlights. Evan Brooks stood outside Giovanni's Italian restaurant, with his hand pressed against the cold brick wall, steadying himself against something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite hope. That terrible space between the two where desperation lives. His reflection stared back at him from the restaurant's front window, distorted by the warm light inside and the condensation gathering on the glass. 38 years old, wearing a navy blazer he'd bought from a thrift store 3 days ago because his only good jacket had a broken zipper. The blazer was slightly too big in the shoulders, but it was clean and it didn't smell like the diesel fuel that clung to his work clothes. His dark hair was combed back, still damp from the shower he'd taken in the community center's locker room because the hot water in his apartment building had been out for a week. He looked like a man trying. That's what he saw in the glass. Not success, not confidence, just effort. The visible strain of someone who'd learned that trying wasn't always enough, but who hadn't yet learned how to stop. "You can do this," he whispered to his reflection, his breath fogging the window. "It's just dinner, just talking to another human being like you're a person who deserves to be talked to." The words felt hollow even as he said them, but he'd learned that sometimes you had to lie to yourself just to take the next step forward. The truth, the real truth he'd been carrying for 6 years, was that he didn't know if he believed he deserved much of anything anymore. But his daughter Mia did. And if there was any chance that being less alone might make him a better father to her, then he owed it to her to try. Evan checked his phone again. 7:43 p.m. He was 17 minutes early, which meant he'd been standing outside in the cold for 12 minutes already, working up the courage to walk through that door. The dating app was still open on his screen, showing the last message from Sarah. "See you at 8. Can't wait." Sent 4 hours ago with an enthusiasm that had made his hands shake when he'd read it. 4 hours. In 4 hours, he'd picked Mia up from after-school care, walked her to his sister Rachel's apartment 6 blocks away, endured Rachel's worried looks and gentle questions about whether he was really ready for this, kissed his daughter goodbye while pretending the anxiety wasn't eating him alive, taken 2 buses to get across town because his car had died 3 months ago and there was no money to fix it, and stood outside this restaurant reminding himself how to breathe like a normal person. The $50 in his wallet, 2 20s and a 10, folded carefully in the front pocket because he'd learned the hard way that his back pocket had a small hole, represented a week of lunches he wouldn't eat. A week of packing extra peanut butter sandwiches for Mia and telling her daddy wasn't hungry, that he'd already eaten at work. The lie came easier each time, which was its own kind of tragedy. But this had to mean something. It had to. Because if he was going to spend money he didn't have on a meal he couldn't afford, then maybe this woman, Sarah, 36, elementary school teacher, loves hiking and bad puns, looking for something real, would be worth it. Maybe she'd see past the thrift store blazer and the lines around his eyes that came from 6 years of single fatherhood and chronic worry. Maybe she'd see him, the person he used to be, the person he might still become. "Excuse me." A couple brushed past him on the sidewalk, the woman's perfume expensive and overwhelming, the man's hand proprietary on her lower back. They moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged in places like Giovanni's, who didn't have to check their bank account before ordering an appetizer. Evan stepped aside, making himself smaller, a habit so ingrained he didn't even notice he was doing it anymore. Through the window, he could see the restaurant's interior, warm lighting, exposed brick walls, tables with white tablecloths and small candles flickering in glass holders. Couples leaned toward each other over pasta and wine. A group of friends laughed at a corner table, their joy so casual it looked choreographed. Everyone inside seemed to occupy space without apology, without fear that someone might ask them why they thought they belonged there. Evan had forgotten what that felt like. Or maybe he'd never known. He pulled open the door, and the warmth hit him immediately, along with the smell of garlic bread and marinara sauce. His stomach responded with an embarrassing growl that reminded him he hadn't eaten since the apple he'd had for breakfast. The dinner rush was in full swing. The hostess stand was crowded with waiting couples, and every table seemed occupied by people who looked like they'd never had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" The hostess was young, probably early 20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from never having worried about anything more serious than which filter to use on Instagram. Her smile was professional, pleasant, and completely impersonal. "Brooks, table for two, 8 o'clock. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, scraped raw by nerves and the cold wind. She scanned her tablet, her manicured finger sliding across the screen. "Brooks. Yes, I have you here. Your party hasn't arrived yet, but I can seat you now if you'd like." "Yes, please. Thank you." He was saying too many words, agreeing too enthusiastically, and he could feel heat climbing up his neck. "Just be normal," he told himself. "Just act like you've done this before." But the truth was, he hadn't. Not in 6 years. Not since Emily. The hostess led him through the restaurant, weaving between tables with practiced ease while Evan followed, hyper-aware of everything. The way his shoes were scuffed, the way his blazer hung wrong, the way he probably looked exactly like what he was, a man pretending to be something he wasn't. "Here you are." She placed 2 menus on a table by the window, the same window he'd been staring through from outside. "Your server will be right with you. Can I get you started with some water?" "Yes. Thank you. Water would be good." He was doing it again, talking too much, filling silence with unnecessary words. She nodded and disappeared, leaving Evan alone at a table set for 2. He sat in the chair facing the door, an old habit from his days in the army before everything fell apart, and immediately wondered if he should have taken the other chair. Was it weird to face the door? Did it make him look paranoid? Should he move? He stayed where he was because moving would be worse. Moving would draw attention. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and laughter around him, a soundtrack of other people's normalcy. To his left, a couple in their 50s shared a bottle of red wine, their hands clasped on the table between them, their faces soft with decades of accumulated affection. To his right, a young family, mom, dad, 2 kids, negotiated over whether garlic bread counted as a vegetable. The father caught Evan's eye and gave him a quick smile, the universal nod of parental solidarity, before turning back to his children. Evan smiled back, or tried to, but it felt wrong on his face, like a mask that didn't quite fit. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it too quickly, nearly knocking over the water glass the server had just placed in front of him. "Sorry," he muttered to the server, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who simply smiled and moved on to the next table. The message wasn't from Sarah. It was from Rachel. "How's it going?" "Mia's doing great. We're making cookies. Don't worry about us." Relief and guilt twisted together in his chest. Mia was fine. Of course she was fine. Rachel loved her, spoiled her, gave her the stability that Evan tried desperately to provide, but always felt like he was failing at. His sister had her own life, her own problems, but she'd never once complained about the nights Evan had shown up at her door, exhausted and overwhelmed, needing someone to watch Mia for a few hours while he worked a double shift or dealt with another crisis. He typed back quickly, "Thanks, Rach. You're a lifesaver. Home by 10. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Take your time. You deserve this." Did he? Evan stared at the message, trying to believe it. Rachel always said things like that, as if saying them enough times would make them true. But deserving implied earning, and what had he earned except the right to keep struggling, keep failing, keep disappointing everyone who'd ever expected more from him? He set the phone face down on the table and checked his watch. 7:52. 8 minutes. The couple to his left clinked their wine glasses together, a soft sound that carried surprising weight. The woman said something Evan couldn't hear, and the man laughed, a sound of genuine delight. They'd probably been together for decades. They probably had a house, savings, a plan for retirement. They probably didn't lie awake at 3 in the morning doing math in their heads, trying to figure out which bill could wait another week. Stop, Evan told himself. Stop comparing. Stop making everything hurt worse than it already does. He picked up the menu even though he'd already decided what he'd order. The cheapest entree, no appetizer, water instead of wine or soda. The menu was heavy, leather-bound, the kind of weight that suggested quality and expense, prices that made his chest tighten. The pasta dishes started at $22. The chicken was $28. Even the salads were $15. He'd suggested this restaurant. Sarah had given him 3 options: a sushi place downtown, a trendy burger joint in Cambridge, or Giovanni's. And he'd chosen Giovanni's because it looked nice in the photos but not too expensive. He'd been wrong about the expensive part, but it was too late to suggest somewhere else. Too late to admit he'd made a mistake, that he couldn't actually afford to be here, that the whole thing had been a stupid idea from the start. 7:56. 4 minutes. Evan folded his hands on the table, then moved them to his lap, then back to the table. Should he order a drink? Would it look weird if he was just sitting there with water when she arrived? But ordering a drink would mean less money for the actual meal, and he needed to at least look like he could afford dinner. His phone buzzed again. His heart jumped, then immediately sank when he saw it wasn't from Sarah. Just a notification from the dating app. Someone else had viewed his profile. He dismissed it without looking. There was only one person he was waiting for tonight. 7:58. 2 minutes. The server returned, notepad in hand. Can I get you started with something to drink while you wait? Just water is fine. Thank you. Evan managed a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. My date should be here any minute. No problem. Take your time. The server moved on, and Evan was alone again with his nervous hands and racing thoughts. What would he say when she arrived? How did people do this? Small talk felt impossible, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. Ask about her day, comment on the weather, tell her about Mia right away, or wait until she asked. Being a single father was part of his profile. He'd been upfront about that, terrified that hiding it would be dishonest. But when did you mention that your whole life revolved around a 7-year-old who still had nightmares about her mother leaving? 7:59. 1 minute. Evan watched the door. Every time it opened, his pulse spiked. A group of college students, an elderly couple, a businessman on his phone. Not Sarah. Not yet. Maybe she was running late. Traffic was terrible in Boston, especially on a Friday night. Or maybe she'd had trouble finding parking. Or maybe 8 o'clock. The time on his phone flipped over to exactly 8 o'clock, and Evan felt something twist in his stomach. Not panic yet, not fear, just awareness. The acute consciousness of sitting alone at a table for 2, waiting for someone who should have been there by now. It's fine, he told himself. People run late. It's normal. Give her a few minutes. He picked up his water glass, realized his hand was shaking slightly, set it back down. The condensation left a ring on the white tablecloth, a small imperfection that seemed to grow more obvious the longer he stared at it. 8:03. 3 minutes wasn't late. 3 minutes was nothing, barely worth noticing. But Evan noticed. He noticed the way the hostess had started glancing at his table when she seated new arrivals. He noticed the server making another pass, not stopping this time, but definitely aware that Evan was still sitting there alone. He noticed the couple to his left finishing their wine, the father to his right ordering dessert for his kids, and the steady, relentless progression of time that made 3 minutes feel like 30. 8:06. His phone sat on the table, screen dark and silent. No message. No call. No, sorry, running late text that would ease the pressure building in his chest. This was fine. This was normal. People got delayed. He was overreacting because he was nervous, because this mattered too much, because he'd built it up in his head as something more significant than a first date with a stranger from an app. 8:10. 10 minutes. 10 minutes was starting to feel less like running late and more like something else. Something that made Evan's throat tight and his palms sweat and his mind raced through every possible explanation that wasn't the one he was trying not to think about. Maybe she'd gotten into an accident. Maybe she was hurt. Maybe there was an emergency with her family. Maybe... His phone lit up. Evan grabbed it so fast he nearly dropped it. A message. Finally. Relief flooded through him before he even read what it said, before he saw the name at the top of the screen. Not Sarah. The message was from an unknown number, but the dating app notification showed it had come through the app's messaging system. Sarah had sent something. His hands were shaking for real now as he opened it. Whatever relief he'd felt evaporated as he read the words on the screen. LOL, you actually showed up? Did you really think I was coming? I only matched with you because my friends and I were bored and wanted to see how desperate guys are on these apps. You look so pathetic in your photos, like you're trying so hard to seem normal. Bet you can't even afford to eat there anyway. Have fun sitting alone, loser. Hope you're enjoying your sad little pity party. The words didn't process at first. Evan read them once, then again, then a third time, each word hitting harder than the last as his brain finally accepted what they meant. She wasn't coming. She'd never planned to come. This was a joke. He was a joke. The phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table. The couple to his left glanced over. Evan didn't look at them. Couldn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on the screen, on those words, pathetic, desperate, loser, glowing in the dim restaurant light. His face was burning. His whole body was burning. Shame crashed over him in waves so powerful he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except sit there and feel the full weight of his own stupidity crushing down on him. He'd been excited. He'd been hopeful. He'd spent money he didn't have, left his daughter with his sister, stood outside in the cold talking himself into believing that maybe, just maybe, he was worth someone's time. And all of it, every single moment of nervous anticipation, had been for nothing. Worse than nothing. Entertainment. He'd been entertainment for some cruel woman and her bored friends. Evan's hands found the edge of the table, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart completely. His vision blurred at the edges, not from tears. He wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of all these people, but from the sheer force of humiliation. The server approached again. Ready to order? The words came from somewhere far away. Evan looked up at the man's kind face and wanted to tell him everything, wanted to explain that this had all been a terrible mistake, that he needed to leave, that he couldn't afford to be here anyway, and now there was no point in staying. But his voice wouldn't work. His throat was closed around something too big and too sharp to swallow. I'm still waiting, Evan managed. The lie tasted like copper. Just a few more minutes. The server nodded, understanding or pretending to understand, and moved on. Just a few more minutes. A few more minutes of sitting here at a table for two alone with a message on his phone that confirmed every terrible thing he'd ever thought about himself. A few more minutes of being visible in his invisibility, of being the man everyone could see was waiting for someone who would never arrive. He should leave. He knew he should leave. Should stand up, walk out, salvage whatever was left of his dignity. But his body wouldn't move, because leaving meant admitting it was over, admitting he'd been fooled, admitting he'd wasted an evening and $50 and whatever remained of his hope on someone who'd seen him as nothing more than a punchline. So Evan sat there, frozen, while the restaurant carried on around him. Couples talked and laughed, families ate together. The world continued, completely indifferent to the fact that his was currently caving in. 8:15. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. OMG, are you still there? My friend just drove by and saw you through the window. You're actually just sitting there like a complete idiot. This is too good. We're dying laughing over here. Please tell me you at least ordered something. I want to know how much money you wasted, thinking I actually wanted to meet you. Something inside Evan cracked. Not broke. Breaking would have been merciful. This was worse. This was the slow fracture of realizing that his humiliation wasn't even over, that it was still happening, that somewhere across the city a group of people were actively enjoying his pain. His hands moved mechanically, locking the phone screen, setting it face down on the table where he wouldn't have to see it if she sent anything else. His jaw ached from clenching it so hard. His eyes burned. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. He'd promised himself he wouldn't be this person anymore. The person who broke down, who fell apart, who couldn't handle the weight of his own life. He'd promised Mia that things were getting better, that Daddy was okay, that they were going to be okay. But sitting in that restaurant, wearing a blazer that didn't fit, clutching a phone full of cruelty, Evan Brooks didn't feel okay. He felt exactly like what Sarah had called him. Pathetic. Desperate. A loser sitting alone in a restaurant he couldn't afford, trying to be someone he wasn't, foolish enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved something more than the scraps of life he'd been surviving on. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation. It was the confirmation, the proof that every fear he'd carried for 6 years was justified. He wasn't ready for this, wasn't good enough for this, wasn't worth anyone's time or effort or basic human decency. 25 feet away, at a table Evan hadn't noticed in his spiral of shame, Lena Sterling set down her wine glass and watched a man's world collapse in real time. She'd seen the whole thing, the nervous arrival, the hopeful waiting, the phone check that had drained the color from his face, the second message that had made his hands shake. She'd watched this stranger, this man in an ill-fitting blazer, clutching the table like a lifeline, try to hold himself together and fail, piece by piece, in front of a room full of people who were too absorbed in their own lives to notice his breaking. But Lena noticed. She always noticed the things other people missed. It was what made her good at her job, good at reading boardrooms and balance sheets, and the unspoken truths behind carefully crafted presentations. But right now, sitting alone at her own table with her own unopened menu, she wasn't thinking about business or strategy or quarterly projections. She was thinking about cruelty, about the specific kind of calculated meanness it took to lure someone out, let them hope, and then systematically destroy that hope for entertainment. She was thinking about the $50 sitting beside her plate, the meals she'd been about to order before something made her look up and see the tragedy unfolding 3 tables away. And she was thinking about a choice, the choice to look away, to mind her own business, to let this stranger suffer his humiliation alone because it wasn't her problem and she had no obligation to get involved. Or the choice to do something, something small, something that might not fix anything but might, for a few minutes, remind someone that not everyone in the world was cruel. Lena caught the server's eye and made a decision that would change 2 lives, though neither of them knew it yet. All she knew was that the man at table 12 deserved to eat his dinner in peace, even if he was eating it alone, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply see someone when they thought they'd become invisible. The server appeared at Lena's table with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent years reading the subtle cues of restaurant patrons. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the kind of quiet competence that came from managing chaos while making it look effortless. "Have you decided on your order, ma'am?" Her voice was professional, warm without being intrusive. Lena didn't look at her menu. Her eyes were still on the man at table 12, watching the way his shoulders had curved inward, the way he was staring at the tablecloth like it held answers to questions he hadn't known he was asking. "I'd like to pay for that gentleman's meal," Lena said quietly. "Whatever he orders, and please don't tell him who it's from, just that it's been taken care of." The server followed Lena's gaze, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps. Or maybe just the understanding that came from spending enough time in restaurants to recognize the difference between someone who was alone by choice and someone who was alone because they'd been abandoned. "Of course," she said, her voice softer now. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness," Lena replied, surprising herself with the honesty. "It's the bare minimum of human decency. There's a difference." The server nodded, made a note on her pad, and moved away. Lena picked up her wine glass, took a sip of the Pinot Noir she'd ordered more out of habit than desire, and wondered when she'd become the kind of person who needed to make that distinction. When had simple acts of consideration become so rare that they warranted being called kind? She knew the answer, of course. She'd been that person for years, maybe her whole life. Growing up in a house where affection was transactional and love was something you earned through achievement, she'd learned early that the world didn't reward softness. It rewarded strength, strategy, the ability to see 3 moves ahead and position yourself accordingly. That mindset had built Sterling Innovations from a struggling startup into one of Boston's most successful tech companies. It had earned her a corner office, a 7-figure salary, respect in an industry that didn't easily give it to women. It had also left her eating alone in restaurants more nights than she cared to count, watching other people's lives unfold while hers remained carefully controlled and profoundly isolated. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the man at table 12, who was still sitting there with his hands pressed flat against the white tablecloth, his entire body rigid with the effort of holding himself together. The server approached his table. Lena watched, half expecting him to bolt, to make some excuse and flee before anyone could witness more of his humiliation. But he didn't move, just looked up when the server spoke, his expression carefully blank in that way people's faces got when they were trying very hard not to feel anything at all. Lena couldn't hear the conversation from where she sat, but she could read the progression on his face. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. His mouth moved, probably asking who, probably asking why, and the server's response made him go very still. For a long moment, he didn't react. Then his eyes swept the restaurant, searching, trying to identify the source of this unexpected grace. His gaze passed over Lena once, twice, not settling on anyone specific because how could he know? How could anyone know that the woman sitting alone 3 tables away, barely looking in his direction, had just decided he deserved to eat his dinner without the additional burden of $50 he clearly couldn't spare? Lena kept her eyes on her wine glass, giving him the privacy to process without the weight of her attention. She'd learned something important in her years of negotiating with people who held their cards close. Sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was the ability to accept help without having to perform gratitude for an audience. When she glanced back, the server was walking away, and the man was staring down at his menu with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. His hands were shaking slightly, she noticed. Not from fear or cold, but from something deeper. The kind of tremor that came from emotions too big to contain. She wondered what he'd order, wondered if he'd actually order anything at all, or if the gesture would send him running, too proud or too confused or too broken to accept it. She'd seen that reaction before, in different contexts. People who'd been hurt so many times that they couldn't recognize genuine help when it appeared. People who'd learned that every kindness came with strings attached, every gift with a price. Her phone buzzed. Work email, probably. Some crisis that couldn't wait until Monday, some fire that only she could put out. Lena ignored it. For once in her carefully scheduled, meticulously managed life, she let something wait. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The man at table 12 hadn't moved, hadn't called the server back, hadn't left. He was just sitting there, staring at the menu like it was written in a language he was trying to decode. Lena was about to look away, to give up on this small act of intervention and return to her own solitary dinner, when something changed. The man's posture straightened slightly. His hand reached out, slow and deliberate, and he picked up the menu with both hands like it weighed more than paper should. He was going to stay. He was going to order. Something in Lena's chest loosened, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. It shouldn't have mattered this much. This stranger's choice to accept a free meal shouldn't have felt like a victory. But it did. In a week of board meetings and budget reviews and strategic planning sessions where every decision carried weight and consequence, this moment, watching someone choose to let themselves be helped, felt more significant than any of it. The server returned to his table. This time, when she spoke to him, he responded. Lena couldn't hear the words, but she could see the exchange. Brief, probably strained, certainly awkward, but happening. That was what mattered. When the server left, the man sat back in his chair. And for the first time since Lena had started watching him, he looked less like someone bracing for impact and more like someone trying to remember how to breathe. Evan's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd folded them in his lap, pressed them flat against his thighs, gripped them together until his knuckles turned white, and still they trembled like leaves in a wind he couldn't escape. Someone had paid for his meal, a stranger. An anonymous stranger who'd seen him sitting here, alone, humiliated, pathetic, and decided he deserved to eat anyway. He didn't know whether to feel grateful or mortified. Both emotions warred in his chest, neither one winning, both of them making it hard to think straight. The server had been kind about it, at least. Professional. She hadn't pitied him or made a big show of the gesture. Just said, "Your meal tonight has been taken care of by another guest. They wanted to remain anonymous, but they wanted you to know you should order whatever you'd like." Whatever you'd like. As if desire had anything to do with it. As if he came to places like this because he wanted to, because he had choices, because his life was full of options and this was just one of many paths he could take. But the alternative, leaving, going home to Rachel's apartment and explaining why he was back so early, facing Mia's questions about his date, felt impossible. And there was something else, something he couldn't quite name, that made the idea of walking away from this anonymous kindness feel like a rejection of the only decent thing that had happened to him in months. So he'd ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu, because even with someone else paying, he couldn't bring himself to take advantage. And water, still just water, because ordering wine felt presumptuous, and he didn't deserve wine anyway. Now he sat alone at a table for two, waiting for food he hadn't paid for, trying not to think about the message still burning in his phone, trying not to wonder who in this restaurant had looked at him and seen someone worth helping instead of someone worth mocking. His eyes drifted across the dining room, studying faces. The couple to his left, finishing their dessert now, had barely glanced his way all night. The family to his right was too absorbed in their own small chaos to notice him. There was a woman sitting alone 3 tables away, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her attention focused on her phone as she absently swirled wine in her glass. She looked professional, composed, like someone who had better things to do than notice broken men in borrowed blazers. It could be anyone, or no one. Maybe the server had lied, trying to spare his feelings. Maybe the restaurant had some policy about not letting customers sit alone looking miserable, some corporate mandate about maintaining ambiance. But that didn't make sense either, because this wasn't some chain restaurant with policies and procedures. This was Giovanni's, family-owned according to the sign outside. The kind of place that probably survived on regulars and reputation rather than corporate efficiency. So someone had done this. Someone had seen him and decided he was worth $50, worth the effort of calling over a server and making arrangements, worth existing in their awareness for more than the few seconds it took to dismiss him as another sad story in a city full of them. The thought made his throat tight. The pasta arrived 15 minutes later, steam rising from the plate, the smell of garlic and basil and olive oil rich enough to make his stomach cramp with sudden hunger. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, and that had only been an apple because Mia needed the good cereal, and he told himself coffee was enough. "Can I get you anything else?" the server asked, setting down a small basket of bread without being asked. Another gift, probably. Another small kindness that made him want to curl into himself and disappear. "No, thank you. This is more than enough." She smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes, and something in her expression reminded him of his mother. The way she used to look at him when he was young and struggling with homework or bullies or the general weight of being a kid who thought too much. Compassion without pity, understanding without judgment. "Enjoy your meal," she said, and walked away. Evan stared at the plate in front of him. Spaghetti carbonara, simple and perfect, probably the best thing he'd seen in weeks. His hands were steadier now as he picked up his fork, twirled pasta around the tines, brought it to his mouth. The first bite was almost painful, not because it wasn't good. It was excellent, rich and creamy, and exactly what food should taste like when you weren't eating it standing over a sink or cold from a takeout container. But because it reminded him of everything he'd been missing, everything he'd given up or lost or never had in the first place. He ate slowly, making it last, aware that this was probably the best meal he'd have for months. Each bite felt stolen somehow, unearned, but he ate anyway because the alternative was waste, and he'd been raised better than that. Halfway through the plate, his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, almost let it sit there face down on the table where it couldn't hurt him anymore. But some masochistic part of him needed to know if Sarah had sent another message, another reminder of his worthlessness, another punchline for her and her friends to laugh about. It wasn't Sarah. It was Rachel. "Mia keeps asking when you'll be home. I told her not until late, but you know how she is. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Hope it's going well." Going well. Right. Evan stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. What could he say? That his date had never shown up? That he'd been publicly humiliated? That he was currently eating charity pasta while trying not to think about how thoroughly he'd failed at the simple task of meeting another human being for dinner? He typed back, "Going fine. Tell Mia I love her and I'll see her in the morning." The lie came easily, too easily. He'd gotten good at lying to protect people he loved, good at pretending things were better than they were, good at wearing whatever mask the situation required. But sitting alone in this restaurant, anonymous kindness dissolving on his tongue, Evan was tired of pretending. Tired of the masks and the lies and the constant, exhausting effort of holding himself together when everything inside was falling apart. He set the phone down and went back to his pasta, chewing mechanically now, the pleasure of the first few bites fading into something closer to obligation. He needed to eat. He needed the calories, needed the energy, needed to not waste food that someone else had paid for. A burst of laughter came from somewhere behind him. Evan flinched without meaning to, the sound too loud, too joyful, too much a reminder of everything happening around him while he sat in his bubble of quiet devastation. He was almost finished with his meal when he felt it, the weight of being watched. That particular prickle of awareness that came from knowing someone's attention was focused on you. Evan looked up slowly, scanning the restaurant, trying to identify the source. His eyes landed on the woman 3 tables away, the one he'd noticed earlier, sitting alone with her wine and her phone. She wasn't looking at him now, but something in her posture, the angle of her shoulders, made him think she had been. Recently. Could it be her? Had she been the one? The thought was absurd. Women who looked like that, polished, professional, obviously successful, didn't pay for meals for men like him. They didn't notice men like him at all, except maybe to step around them on the sidewalk or avoid eye contact in elevators. But she was alone. And she had the kind of face that suggested she noticed things, the kind of sharp intelligence in her features that came from spending a lot of time observing the world around her. Evan looked away before she could catch him staring, before he could make this whole situation even more awkward than it already was. What would he even say if he was right? Thank you for taking pity on me? Thanks for noticing I was too pathetic to afford my own dinner? No. Better to leave it alone. Better to finish his meal, leave a tip he couldn't afford because the server had been kind and that deserved acknowledgement, and go home to his sister's apartment where his daughter was waiting, and his real life, the one that didn't involve dating apps or failed blind dates or anonymous charity, could resume. He was reaching for the last piece of bread when someone approached his table, not the server this time. The woman. The one who'd been sitting alone. Evan's heart stuttered. Up close, she was even more striking. Dark eyes that missed nothing, high cheekbones, an expression that managed to be both neutral and somehow warm at the same time. She was probably in her early 40s, wearing a charcoal blazer that actually fit, carrying herself with the kind of natural authority that suggested she was used to being in charge. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice low and measured, "but I wanted to ask if the seat across from you was taken." Evan stared at her, his brain struggling to process the question. Was she serious? Could she not see the very obvious empty chair, the unused place setting, the complete lack of another human being? His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat, tried again. "No, it's not taken. May I sit? Just for a moment." It wasn't really a question, more a courtesy. She was already pulling out the chair, already settling into it with practiced ease. Evan nodded because what else could he do? His mouth had gone dry. This was her. Had to be her. Why else would she approach him, a stranger, in a crowded restaurant? She folded her hands on the table, studying him with a directness that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. There was no pity in her eyes, no condescension, just curiosity, and maybe something else. Recognition, perhaps, the kind that came from seeing yourself in someone else's struggle. "I'm Lena," she said simply. Evan. His name felt strange in his mouth, like he was introducing someone he didn't quite recognize anymore. "Evan?" she repeated, testing the sound of it. "I hope you don't think I'm being intrusive, but I noticed you were waiting for someone earlier." Heat flooded his face. So she had seen everything probably. The hopeful waiting, the message that had destroyed him, the way he'd sat there frozen while his humiliation played out for anyone paying attention. "I was," he managed. "She didn't show up." I gathered. Lena's expression didn't change, but something in her voice softened. That was incredibly cruel of her. The validation hit harder than Evan expected. Someone else saying it, acknowledging that what had happened wasn't normal or acceptable or something he should just brush off. It made the whole thing real in a way it hadn't been when it was just him and his thoughts and a cruel message on his phone. "You paid for my meal," he said. Not a question. He knew now, with complete certainty. Lena didn't deny it. "I did." "Why?" The question hung between them, heavy with all the things Evan wasn't saying. Why would you care? Why would you waste money on someone like me? Why would you see me when I feel invisible? Lena was quiet for a moment, considering. When she spoke, her words were careful, deliberate, chosen with the precision of someone who understood that language mattered. "Because you looked like you were having the worst night of your life, and nobody else seemed to notice or care. Because I've had nights like that, and I remember what it felt like to think I was completely alone. And because..." She paused, something flickering across her face too quickly to identify. "Because you deserve to eat your dinner in peace, regardless of whether someone else decided you were worth their time. You are. Worth it, I mean." The last three words nearly undid him. "You are. Worth it," said with such simple conviction, such matter-of-fact certainty, as if it was obvious, as if there was no question. Evan's vision blurred. He blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who'd already seen too much of his breakdown. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't really afford to pay you back right now, but I can..." "Stop." Lena's voice was firm, but not unkind. This wasn't a loan. It wasn't an investment expecting return. It was just one person buying another person dinner, that's all. No debt, no obligation. "But do you have children, Evan?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes, a daughter, Mia. She's 7. Something shifted in Lena's expression. Warmth, maybe. Understanding. "Then let me ask you this. If Mia needed something, food, help, whatever, and a stranger provided it, would you want her to feel indebted? Would you want her carrying that weight?" "No, of course not." "Then why are you carrying it?" Lena leaned forward slightly, her eyes intent on his. "You're allowed to accept help without making it a transaction. You're allowed to let someone do something kind without turning it into a debt you have to repay. That's what I'm trying to tell you." Evan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it wasn't that simple, that accepting help felt like admitting defeat, like confirming all the ways he'd failed. But the words wouldn't come because maybe she was right. Maybe he was so used to struggling alone that he'd forgotten how to let anyone ease the burden, even for a moment. "I've been where you are," Lena continued, her voice quieter now. "Not exactly, but close enough. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, like you're failing at the basic task of being human. And I know what it's like when someone sees that and doesn't look away." "What happened?" Evan asked before he could stop himself. "When someone saw you, I mean." Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't let them help. I was too proud, too convinced that accepting anything from anyone was weakness. And I regretted it for years after, because that person was trying to tell me the same thing I'm trying to tell you now. That struggling doesn't make you strong. That accepting help doesn't make you weak. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone else carry part of the weight for a while." The restaurant buzzed around them. Conversations and laughter and the clink of silverware against plates. But at their table, in the small bubble of space they'd created, everything was still. "Your daughter," Lena said after a moment. "Tell me about her." It was an abrupt subject change, but Evan grabbed onto it gratefully, eager for anything that didn't require him to examine his own brokenness. "She's everything," he said simply. "Smart. Too smart, probably. She notices things, asks questions I don't always know how to answer. She likes dinosaurs and space and this one specific brand of strawberry yogurt that costs twice as much as the store brand, so I buy it anyway because it makes her happy." "You're a single father?" 6 years now, her mother..." Evan stopped, the old pain still sharp enough to cut. "Emily left when Mia was 1. Said she couldn't do it anymore. The crying, the diapers, the way our whole lives had to revolve around this tiny person who needed everything and gave nothing back, so she left. And it's been just us ever since." He'd never said it so plainly to a stranger before. Usually he dressed it up in euphemisms, protected Emily's memory or Mia's feelings or his own pride. But something about Lena's directness invited honesty. That must be incredibly difficult, Lena said. It's not difficult. It's impossible. Except I don't have the luxury of calling it impossible, so I call it difficult instead, and I keep going because what else can I do? The words came faster now, spilling out like he'd opened a valve he didn't know how to close. I work construction during the day. Sometimes I pick up shifts as a janitor at night. I lie to my daughter about whether I've eaten because her nutrition matters more than mine. I buy clothes from thrift stores and tell myself it doesn't matter that they don't quite fit. I take buses across town because my car died and I can't afford to fix it. And I tried. Tonight I tried to maybe have something for myself for once. Something that wasn't about survival or sacrifice or just getting through another day. And look how that turned out. He gestured vaguely at the empty chair across from him, at the restaurant around them, at himself. Evidence of his failure, all of it. Lena didn't look away, didn't flinch or offer platitudes or tell him it would get better. She just listened, and somehow that was exactly what he needed. "You're not a failure, Evan," she said when he finally fell silent. "You're exhausted. There's a difference." "Feels the same from where I'm sitting." "I know, but feelings aren't facts." She paused, considering. "Can I tell you something? And I need you to actually hear it, not just listen and dismiss it because you think I'm just being nice." Evan nodded, not trusting his voice. "What you're doing, raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, sacrificing everything so she can have what she needs. That's not failing. That's the opposite of failing. That's showing up every single day for someone who depends on you, even when it's crushing you, even when you have nothing left to give. That's not weakness, Evan. That's the strongest thing a person can do." "Then why does it feel like I'm drowning?" "Because strength doesn't mean you don't struggle. It just means you keep your head above water, even when every wave tries to pull you under." Lena's voice was gentle but firm. "And tonight, someone threw you a life preserver. That's all this was. Not charity, not pity. Just one person seeing another person struggling and thinking, I can help with that. I can make this one thing easier." Evan closed his eyes, letting the words settle. When he opened them again, Lena was still there, still watching him with that same unwavering attention that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't been in years. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he asked. "You don't know me. I'm just some guy who got stood up on a date." "You're not just anything," Lena replied, "and I'm being nice because that's what people should do. See each other. Help each other. Not because there's something in it for them, but because that's what it means to be human." The server appeared at the edge of their table, tactfully waiting. Lena glanced up, then back at Evan. "I should let you finish your meal," she said, starting to stand. "Wait." The word came out before Evan could think better of it. "Would you... you've already been so kind, and I don't want to impose, but would you want to stay, just for a little while? I don't..." He trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "I don't want to be alone. I don't want this moment to end. I don't want to go back to my life where nobody sees me." Lena settled back into her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'd like that." And just like that, the worst night of Evan's life began to transform into something else entirely. Not a rescue, not a salvation, just two people sharing space, sharing conversation, sharing the simple revolutionary act of seeing each other as worth the effort. They talked for another hour, the words coming easier as the minutes passed. Lena told him about her company, about the exhaustion of being in charge all the time, about how success had brought her everything except the one thing she'd wanted most, connection. Evan talked about Mia, about his sister Rachel, about the small moments of joy that punctuated the overwhelming difficulty of his life. Neither of them solved anything. Neither of them fixed the fundamental challenges they faced. But for those 60 minutes in a Boston restaurant, surrounded by the noise of other people's lives, they reminded each other what it felt like to matter to someone, to be heard, to exist as more than their struggles. When they finally stood to leave, Lena handed Evan a business card with her contact information. "If you ever need anything," she said, "or if you don't need anything, but you want to talk to someone who won't think you're pathetic for admitting life is hard sometimes, call me." Evan took the card, his fingers closing around it like it was precious, which maybe it was. "Thank you," he said. For everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible. You were never invisible, Evan. You just needed someone to prove it. They parted ways on the sidewalk outside Giovanni's, Lena heading toward the parking garage and Evan toward the bus stop. He watched her go, this stranger who'd become something more in the space of an evening, and felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope that had brought him to the restaurant in the first place. Something sturdier, the kind built on the foundation of being known, being seen, being valued by someone who had no reason to lie. His phone buzzed. Another message. For a moment, fear spiked. What if it was Sarah again? What if the cruelty wasn't over? But when he looked at the screen, it was just Rachel. Mia fell asleep on the couch. Take your time. Hope you're having a good night. Evan smiled, really smiled, for the first time in hours. I am, he typed back. Better than I expected. And standing there on a cold Boston street, holding a business card that felt like a promise and a pasta dinner that tasted like grace, Evan Brooks began to believe that maybe he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. Maybe sometimes the world gave you exactly what you needed, right when you'd stopped believing you deserved it. The business card lived in Evan's wallet for 3 days before he worked up the courage to look at it again. Not because he'd forgotten about Lena, she'd occupied his thoughts almost constantly since that Friday night, but because examining the card meant deciding what to do about it. And deciding required a kind of bravery he wasn't sure he possessed. Monday morning found him on a construction site in Dorchester, hauling equipment in the November cold while his mind replayed their conversation for the 100th time. The way she'd looked at him without pity. The way she'd listened like his words mattered. The way she'd somehow made him feel less alone in a crowded restaurant than he'd felt in 6 years of actual solitude. Brooks, you planning to move that lumber or just stare at it? His foreman's voice cut through the memory, sharp with impatience. Sorry, Mike. On it. Evan hefted the 2x4s, his muscles protesting the weight after a weekend of restless sleep and too many thoughts. The physical labor was usually a relief, a way to shut off his brain and let his body do what it was trained to do. But today, every movement felt mechanical, his mind stubbornly elsewhere. During lunch break, sitting on a stack of plywood with his peanut butter sandwich and thermos of coffee, Evan pulled out his wallet. The card was tucked behind his expired driver's license, the thick cream-colored paper somehow elegant despite being slightly worn at the edges from 3 days of handling. Lena Sterling, CEO, Sterling Innovations. A phone number, an email address. And handwritten on the back in neat script, You matter. Don't forget. 3 words that had kept him awake at night, turning them over in his mind like stones he was trying to read in the dark. You matter. As if it was simple. As if she could just decide that about him and make it true. Who's the fancy lady? Carlos, one of the younger guys on the crew, peered over his shoulder before Evan could put the card away. Nobody. Just someone I met. Evan tucked the card back into his wallet, heat climbing his neck. Must be somebody if you're carrying her card around like a lucky charm. Carlos grinned, nudging him with an elbow. She pretty? It's not like that. Sure it's not. That's why you've been walking around with your head in the clouds for 3 days. Carlos took a bite of his burrito, still grinning. You should call her, man. What's the worst that could happen? Evan could think of several worst-case scenarios, actually. She could realize she'd made a mistake, that he'd misread her kindness for something more than it was. She could be busy, important, too occupied with her actual life to waste time on someone like him. She could answer the phone and not remember who he was, this forgettable man she'd pitied at a restaurant. Or she could answer, and everything could be exactly as terrible as he feared, and he'd have to face the confirmation that Friday night had been an aberration, a moment of grace that couldn't be replicated in the harsh light of ordinary days. The worst that could happen is I make a fool of myself, Evan said finally. Brother, you're already making a fool of yourself by not calling. At least if you call, you'll know. Carlos stood, crumpling his burrito wrapper. Life's too short to wonder what if, you know? The afternoon stretched on, repetitive and exhausting. Evan's hands knew the work without his brain's involvement. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. The rhythm was almost meditative, except his thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What if? What if he called and she actually wanted to talk to him? What if their conversation hadn't been a one-time kindness, but the beginning of something real? What if he was so busy protecting himself from disappointment that he was throwing away the first genuine connection he'd felt in years? By the time his shift ended at 5, Evan had made and unmade the decision to call at least a dozen times. He rode the bus to Rachel's apartment, picked up Mia, and listened to her excited chatter about the solar system project she was working on at school, all while the cards seemed to burn through his wallet and into his hip. "Daddy, are you listening?" Mia tugged on his sleeve as they walked the 6 blocks to their apartment. "Of course, sweetheart. You were telling me about Saturn's rings." "No, that was 5 minutes ago. Now I'm talking about how Mrs. Patterson said I can present my project to the whole class." She looked up at him with those serious dark eyes that were so much like Emily's it sometimes hurt to meet them. "You seem distracted." 7 years old, and she could read him better than most adults. Evan squeezed her hand gently. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about the date you had on Friday?" Mia asked, her voice careful. "Aunt Rachel said you went to meet a nice lady." Evan's chest tightened. He'd managed to avoid this conversation over the weekend, deflecting Rachel's questions and Mia's curiosity with vague statements about it being fine. But his daughter was persistent, and she deserved better than evasions. "The lady I was supposed to meet didn't show up," he said carefully. "But I met someone else. Someone kind." "Are you going to see her again?" "I don't know, Mia. Maybe, if she wants to." Mia was quiet for a moment, her small hand warm in his. Then she said with the blunt honesty of children, "I think you should call her. You've been happier the last few days. Different happy. Like when you're not just pretending for me." The observation hit harder than it should have. Evan stopped walking, crouched down so he was eye level with his daughter on the cold sidewalk. "I'm not pretending with you, sweetheart. I'm always happy when I'm with you." "I know, but you're sad happy. Like you're happy because of me, but sad because of everything else." Mia's expression was solemn, too knowing for someone who should still believe in uncomplicated joy. "If this lady makes you regular happy, you should talk to her." Evan pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against the November wind and the weight of her terrible, perfect understanding. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she started carrying the burden of his unhappiness alongside her own childhood? "When did you get so smart?" he asked, his voice rough. "I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're busy being worried." She pulled back, studying his face. "So will you call her?" "Yeah," Evan heard himself say. "Yeah, I think I will." That night, after Mia was asleep in the bedroom they shared, her small bed against one wall, his mattress on the floor against the other, Evan sat in their tiny kitchen with Lena's card on the table in front of him and his phone in his hand. It was 8:30. Too late? Too early? Was there a proper time to call someone who'd bought you dinner and told you that you mattered? Was there etiquette for this situation that he was supposed to know? He'd composed and deleted 7 text messages already, each one sounding worse than the last. Too casual, too formal, too desperate, too indifferent. Nothing felt right because nothing could adequately express what he wanted to say. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for that moment of grace. I don't know what this is or what it could be, but I want to find out." Finally, before he could overthink it anymore, Evan dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, he almost hung up, convinced this was a mistake, that he was about to make a fool of himself exactly as he'd feared. Then, "Hello?" Lena's voice, clear and warm, instantly recognizable. Evan's prepared speech evaporated. "Hi, it's Evan, Brooks, from Friday night, at the restaurant. I don't know if you remember." "Evan," the warmth in her voice intensified. "Of course I remember. I'm glad you called." "You are." The words came out before he could stop them, too raw, too honest. "I am. I was hoping you would." A pause, and he could hear background noise, voices, movement, the ambient sound of public space. "I'm just finishing up at the office, but I have a few minutes. How are you?" How was he? Terrified, hopeful, confused about what he was doing and why he'd thought this was a good idea. "I'm okay. Good. Better than Friday, anyway." Lena's laugh was soft. "That's not a high bar." No, no, it's not. Evan found himself smiling despite his nerves. I wanted to thank you again. For everything. The meal, the conversation, all of it. You didn't have to do any of that. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. Her voice gentled. Evan, you don't need to keep thanking me. I meant what I said Friday night, about all of it. I've been carrying your card around for 3 days trying to work up the courage to call. 3 days? I'm flattered it only took that long. I half expected never to hear from you again. Something in her tone suggested she was moving, perhaps leaving her office. The background noise shifted, became quieter. Can I be honest with you about something? Please. I don't do this. Approach strangers in restaurants, pay for their meals, give out my personal number. In fact, I've never done it before Friday. My entire life is scheduled, controlled, carefully managed to maximize efficiency and minimize unpredictability. And then I saw you sitting there and something just shifted. I couldn't not help. And when we talked, when you opened up about your life and your daughter, I realized how lonely I've been in my perfectly controlled existence. Evan absorbed this, trying to reconcile the confident woman from Friday night with this admission of isolation. You seemed so put together, like you had everything figured out. That's what 30 years of practice looks like. I've gotten very good at appearing like I have my life in perfect order. But appearing and being are two different things. A pause. I run a company with 200 employees. I make decisions that affect people's livelihoods every day. I have a corner office and a car that costs more than most people make in a year. And I eat dinner alone more nights than I can count because I've prioritized success over everything else, including basic human connection. Why are you telling me this? Evan asked quietly. Because I don't want you to think I'm some savior who swooped in to rescue you. I'm just another person trying to figure out how to be less alone. You were honest with me Friday night, brutally honest in a way most people never are. I want to return that honesty. Something in Evan's chest loosened, a tension he hadn't known he was carrying. They were both broken, just in different ways, both lonely, just with different resources to mask it. The realization was strangely comforting. I'd like to see you again, he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. If you want to. I don't know what that looks like or what you'd want from someone like me, but someone like you? Lena interrupted gently. Evan, stop doing that. Stop diminishing yourself. You're a father raising a child alone while working multiple jobs. You're someone who shows up even when it's hard, even when you're exhausted, even when people are cruel to you. That's not someone like you. That's someone remarkable. I don't feel remarkable. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days. Most remarkable people do. The ones who think they're remarkable are usually insufferable. He could hear the smile in her voice. So yes, I'd like to see you again. What does your schedule look like? Evan almost laughed. His schedule was a patchwork of construction shifts, janitor work, and the hours he could beg Rachel to watch Mia. Complicated. I work construction during the day, and sometimes I pick up evening shifts cleaning office buildings. And I have Mia most of the time. What about coffee? Saturday morning, if you're free. There's a place near the Boston Common that opens early. You could bring Mia if you need to. The offer was so casual, so matter-of-fact, as if having a 7-year-old along on a coffee date was completely normal. Most women he'd encountered over the years, admittedly few, had treated Mia like an inconvenience at best, a deal-breaker at worst. Are you sure? She asks a lot of questions. About everything. She doesn't really have a filter. I like smart children who ask questions. They're more interesting than most adults I talk to. Lena paused. Evan, I'm not asking you to compartmentalize your life. Your daughter is part of who you are. I'd like to meet her if you're comfortable with that. Comfortable. Was he comfortable introducing Mia to someone he'd known for less than a week? Someone who might disappear as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving both of them to deal with the fallout? But the alternative was saying no, was pushing away this connection before it had a chance to become anything real. And Mia had been right. He'd been sad happy for so long he'd forgotten what the regular kind felt like. Maybe it was worth the risk. Saturday morning, he agreed. 10 o'clock? Perfect. Text me when you're on your way." Her voice warmed. "I'm looking forward to it, Evan. To seeing you again. To meeting the daughter who clearly means everything to you." After they hung up, Evan sat in his quiet kitchen for a long time, staring at his phone like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. What was he doing? What was he hoping for? What happened when someone like Lena, successful, sophisticated, clearly out of his league, realized that his life was an endless cycle of barely making rent and choosing between necessities? But beneath the fear was something else. Anticipation. The fragile, tentative hope that maybe this wouldn't end in disappointment. That maybe, for once, something good could happen without immediately falling apart. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of November day that promised snow but hadn't delivered yet. Evan woke early, his stomach churning with nerves, and found Mia already awake, sitting on her bed with her solar system project spread out around her. "Is today the day we meet your friend?" she asked, without looking up from the careful arrangement of painted styrofoam balls. "Her name is Lena, and yes, if you still want to come." "Of course I want to come. I need to make sure she's nice to you." Mia glanced up, her expression serious. "Aunt Rachel says some people aren't nice even when they pretend to be. I'm good at telling the difference." Evan's heart squeezed. When had his 7-year-old daughter decided she needed to protect him? When had their roles reversed enough that she felt responsible for vetting his friendships? "I appreciate that, sweetheart, but this is just coffee, just talking. You don't need to worry." "I'm not worried. I'm careful. There's a difference." She went back to her planets, her small hands precise as she positioned Earth just right. "What should I wear?" They settled on her favorite purple sweater and jeans, which Mia paired with rain boots because she liked the way they splashed in puddles. Evan wore his cleanest pair of jeans and a flannel shirt that was only slightly frayed at the cuffs, and tried not to think about how Lena had probably spent more on her blazer than he spent on groceries in a month. The coffee shop Lena had suggested was a small independent place with big windows and mismatched furniture, the kind of spot that attracted students and artists and people who wanted their coffee to taste like coffee instead of dessert. Evan spotted Lena immediately. She was sitting at a corner table reading something on her tablet, a cup of coffee already in front of her. She looked different than she had at the restaurant, more casual in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look approachable instead of corporate. When she glanced up and saw them, her face lit up with a genuine smile that made Evan's nervous stomach settle slightly. "Evan?" She stood as they approached, and Evan noticed she didn't tower over him in sneakers the way she might have in heels. "And this must be Mia." Mia studied Lena with the serious intensity she brought to everything, taking in details Evan probably wouldn't notice. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she nodded. "Hi. Daddy says you were nice to him when someone was mean. Thank you for that." Lena's expression softened. "You're welcome. Your dad deserved kindness that night." "He deserves it every night, actually." "I know, I tell him that, but he doesn't always listen." Mia pulled out a chair and climbed onto it with the confidence of a child who'd been taught that she belonged in the world. "Do you like space?" "I do. Are you interested in astronomy?" "I'm doing a project on the solar system. Did you know that if the sun was as tall as a typical front door, Earth would be the size of a nickel?" And just like that, they were off. Evan ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate for Mia, then sat back and watched his daughter interrogate Lena with questions about planets, stars, and whether she thought there was life on other worlds. To Lena's credit, she didn't talk down to Mia or dismiss her curiosity. She engaged fully, asking follow-up questions, admitting when she didn't know something, treating Mia's interests with the same seriousness she probably brought to business meetings. "Your daughter is brilliant," Lena said when Mia excused herself to use the bathroom, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "She has your eyes, and your honesty. She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I know for certain I got right." Well, Evan wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you for being patient with her questions. Most people get overwhelmed pretty quickly. Most people are boring." Lena leaned forward slightly. "She's perceptive too. The way she looked at me when you first arrived, she was evaluating whether I'm safe for you to be around. She's protective of you." "She shouldn't have to be. She's 7. She should be worried about 7-year-old things, not whether her dad is okay. But she is worried because she loves you. That's not a burden you put on her, Evan. That's just what happens when people love each other. They worry. They want the best for each other. Lena paused, choosing her words carefully. Has it been just the two of you since her mother left? Mostly. My sister Rachel helps when she can. But yeah, it's primarily been me and Mia figuring things out as we go. That must be exhausting. It's terrifying, Evan admitted. Every decision feels massive because I'm the only one making it. What school, what doctor, how to talk to her about her mother, when to push her, and when to let her rest. I'm making it up as I go and hoping I'm not screwing her up too badly. You're not screwing her up. She's confident, curious, kind. Those things don't happen by accident. They happen because someone is doing the hard work of parenting well. Before Evan could respond, Mia returned, climbing back into her chair with a folded piece of paper in her hand. I drew this for you, she announced, sliding the paper across the table to Lena. It's Saturn. It's my favorite planet because the rings are beautiful and it's made of gas, but it still exists. I think that's cool. Lena unfolded the drawing carefully, studying the careful crayon rendition of Saturn with its rainbow-colored rings. This is wonderful, Mia. Thank you. I'm going to put this on my desk at work. Really? Mia's eyes widened. At your important job. Especially at my important job. Sometimes when I'm having difficult meetings, I'll look at it and remember that there are more interesting things in the universe than quarterly reports. Lena caught Evan's eye, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition of something neither of them had names for yet. They stayed for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Lena told them about Sterling Innovations, explaining what her company did in terms simple enough for Mia to follow. She asked about Mia's school, her favorite subjects, what she wanted to be when she grew up. I want to be an astronaut, Mia declared, or a paleontologist, or maybe both. Can you be both? I don't see why not. The best way to be good at anything is to be curious about everything. Lena glanced at her watch, then seemed to make a decision. I have something I'd like to run by both of you, if you have a few more minutes. Evan nodded, curious. My company is starting a new initiative focused on work-life balance and supporting employees with families. Part of that is understanding what real families actually need, not what executives think they need. She looked directly at Mia. I was wondering if you and your dad would be willing to come tour Sterling Innovations sometime. I'd love your perspective on what would make a workplace more family-friendly. And Mia, I'd particularly like to hear your thoughts on what would help kids feel welcome in spaces where their parents work. Mia's face lit up. Like a field trip? Exactly like a field trip. We could order lunch, you could explore the office, meet some of the people who work there. And if you have ideas about how we could make things better for employees with children, I'd genuinely like to hear them. Evan's throat tightened. She was asking for Mia's input, treating his 7-year-old daughter like her opinions mattered, like her perspective had value. Most people barely acknowledged Mia existed beyond polite hellos. Lena was inviting her into her professional space, suggesting that a child's view might actually improve how a company operated. We'd love to, Evan managed, if you're sure. I'm completely sure. How about next Saturday? Say 11 o'clock? That gives you time to sleep in a bit. Lena smiled at Mia. What do you think? Want to help me make my company better? Yes! Mia bounced in her seat. Can I bring my solar system project? I have to finish it by next Friday, and maybe your employees would like to see it. I think they'd love to see it. We have a presentation room you could use. As they left the coffee shop, Mia slipped her hand into Evan's on one side, and after a moment's hesitation, reached for Lena's hand on the other. It was such a simple gesture, such a natural expression of trust, but it made Evan's eyes sting with emotions he couldn't name. Lena squeezed Mia's hand gently, and when she met Evan's gaze over his daughter's head, he saw his own wonder reflected back at him. This was happening. Whatever this was, it was becoming real. Not just a moment of grace in a restaurant, but something with continuity, with future implications, with the possibility of changing the shape of their lives. I like her, Mia announced as they rode the bus home later. She listens, really listens, not pretend listens like some grown-ups do. I like her too, Evan admitted. Are you going to be boyfriend-girlfriend? The question, delivered with childlike directness, made Evan choke on air. We just met, sweetheart. It's too early for that kind of talk. But you like her in the special way. I can tell. Mia swung her legs, her rain boots thumping against the bus seat. It's okay if you do, Daddy. You're allowed to like someone who's nice to you. The wisdom of 7-year-olds. Evan pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. When did you get so smart about feelings? I've always been smart about feelings. You just don't usually ask me about them. She snuggled against his side. I think maybe we could be happy. The three of us. Not right away, but maybe eventually. If she wants to be part of our family. The hope in her voice was almost unbearable. Evan wanted to protect her from disappointment, wanted to caution her not to get attached too quickly, wanted to remind her that good things in their lives had a tendency to disappear, but he also wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That night, after Mia was asleep, Evan's phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Thank you for today. Meeting Mia was a joy. She's absolutely brilliant, and she clearly adores you. See you next Saturday? And Evan, you're doing an incredible job. I hope you know that. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for seeing us. Both of us. Looking forward to Saturday. Her reply came quickly. I see you, Evan. Both of you. That's not going to change. And lying on his mattress on the floor of his daughter's bedroom, in their tiny apartment with thin walls and a heater that barely worked, Evan Brooks let himself believe it might be true. The week between coffee and the office visit passed in a strange suspension of time, each day feeling simultaneously endless and too short. Evan found himself checking his phone more often than he should, reading and rereading Lena's messages like they contained hidden meanings he might have missed the first dozen times. Their texts were frequent, but never intrusive. She'd send him articles about parenting or space exploration with notes like, thought Mia might find this interesting, or reminded me of your conversation about teaching her to advocate for herself. He'd respond with updates about Mia's solar system project, or observations about his day that felt safe to share. Small windows into their separate lives that somehow made the distance between coffee dates feel less vast. On Wednesday, Evan's phone rang during his lunch break. Lena's name on the screen sent his pulse racing in a way that felt both exciting and terrifying. Hey, he answered, stepping away from the construction site noise. Everything okay? Everything's fine. I was just thinking about Saturday and wanted to make sure you knew there's no pressure around the office visit. Her voice carried the background hum of traffic. If it feels like too much, or if you'd rather just grab lunch somewhere instead, that's completely fine. Are you having second thoughts? The question came out more vulnerable than Evan intended. No, not at all. I'm worried you might be. A pause, and he could hear her choosing words carefully. Evan, I know my world probably looks very different from yours. Big office, corporate environment, people in expensive suits talking about things that might not matter to you. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or like you need to perform some version of yourself that isn't real. The observation was so accurate, it stole his breath. He had been worried about exactly that, walking into her territory, surrounded by her success, feeling like an imposter in his thrift store clothes. I'm scared I'll embarrass you, he admitted. Me and Mia, we don't fit into that world. You're not supposed to fit into my world, Evan. That's the whole point. Lena's voice gentled. I spend all my time with people who fit perfectly, who say the right things, wear the right clothes, perform success like it's a script they've memorized. And I'm exhausted by it. You and Mia are real. You're honest. That's not something to be embarrassed about. Your employees are going to wonder why you're bringing random people into the office. They're going to wonder why their CEO is finally taking an interest in what actually matters instead of just quarterly earnings. He could hear the smile in her voice. Besides, I'm not bringing random people. I'm bringing a consultant and his brilliant daughter to help us understand how to better support working parents. That's a legitimate business purpose. A consultant? Lena, I work construction. I'm not qualified to consult on anything except maybe how to frame a wall. You're raising a child alone while working multiple jobs in a society that's structured to make that nearly impossible. You're navigating systems that weren't designed with people like you in mind. You're an expert in exactly what we need to understand. Her tone shifted, became more serious. Can I tell you what I really want from Saturday? Please. I want you to see my life, not the polished version I show investors or the carefully managed image I present to the board. I want you to see what my days actually look like, what I've built, what matters to me professionally. Because if we're going to keep doing this, whatever this is, you should know what you're getting into. And I should know if the person I'm becoming when I'm with you can exist in the same space as the person I've had to be to succeed. The honesty in her admission made something in Evan's chest unclench. She was scared too. Maybe not of the same things, but scared nonetheless. Worried about the same fundamental question that had been keeping him awake at night. Could two people from such different worlds actually build something that lasted? Okay, he said, we'll come. And I promise to give you my honest opinion about everything, even if it's not what you want to hear. Especially if it's not what I want to hear. That's when I need honesty most. Saturday arrived with the kind of clarity that made Boston beautiful despite the cold. Evan and Mia took the train into the financial district, Mia clutching her completed solar system project in a cardboard box like it contained something precious. She'd finished it the night before, staying up past her bedtime to make sure every planet was positioned correctly, every fact card perfectly written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. Sterling Innovations occupied 3 floors of a modern building near the waterfront, all glass and steel and the kind of architectural confidence that came with success. Evan's stomach churned as they walked through the lobby, feeling acutely aware of every way they didn't belong. Mia's worn sneakers squeaking on marble floors, his jacket that was warm but definitely not stylish. The security guards barely concealed surprise when Evan gave their names and explained they were expected. But then the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor and Lena was there, waiting for them with a smile that made the nerves settle slightly. "You made it," she said, and Evan noticed she was dressed more casually than he'd expected, dark slacks and a simple blouse instead of a power suit, making herself less intimidating maybe, meeting them halfway. "Mia, is that your project?" "Yes, do you want to see it?" Mia was already opening the box, eager to share her work. "Absolutely. But first, let me show you around. Then we'll find the perfect place for your presentation." The office was open concept, all collaborative spaces and natural light, and people who looked both busy and somehow relaxed. Lena introduced them to employees as they passed, and Evan braced for judgment or curiosity. But mostly people just smiled and welcomed them with the kind of casual friendliness that suggested Lena had prepared them somehow. "This is our main development area," Lena explained, gesturing to a large room filled with computers and whiteboards covered in diagrams Evan couldn't begin to decipher. "We create software solutions for healthcare providers, making patient data more accessible while maintaining privacy protections." So you help doctors take care of people better?" Mia asked. "Exactly. When doctors can see all of someone's medical history quickly and easily, they can make better decisions about treatment." Lena crouched down to Mia's level. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah, like when I fell off the swings and we went to the hospital and Daddy had to tell them about my allergies because they didn't already know. If they had your software, they'd already know, right?" "Right. That's exactly the kind of problem we're trying to solve." They continued the tour, Lena explaining things in terms both Evan and Mia could understand, never talking down, but also never assuming knowledge they didn't have. She showed them the employee break room, the meditation spaces, the small daycare facility that served employees' children during school breaks. "This is what I wanted your input on," Lena said, gesturing to the daycare area. It was nice enough, bright, clean, filled with age-appropriate toys. But something about it felt sterile, more like a doctor's office than a place where kids would actually want to spend time. "We added this 2 years ago, but the usage is lower than we expected. I'm trying to figure out why parents aren't using it." Evan looked around, seeing it through the eyes of a parent who'd spent 6 years figuring out childcare. The space was well-intentioned but missing something essential. "Can I be honest? Please." "It looks like childcare designed by people who don't use childcare. Everything's too perfect, too controlled. It feels like a place where kids should be quiet and well-behaved instead of a place where they can actually be kids." "What would you change?" Lena pulled out her phone, ready to take notes. "The furniture's all new and matching. That's intimidating for kids who are used to mismatched stuff at home. The toys are educational but not fun. And there's no space for mess, No art station where kids can actually create things without worrying about keeping everything pristine. Evan paused, then added, "Also, it's too far from the main work areas. Parents want to be close enough to their kids to check in easily. Being 3 hallways away means they're always anxious about whether their kid is okay." Mia tugged on Lena's sleeve. "And there's no books about space. How are kids supposed to learn about the universe if there's no space books?" Lena laughed, making notes on her phone. "You're absolutely right, both of you. This is exactly what I needed to hear." She looked at Evan with something like admiration. "You see things I miss, things my expensive consultants miss because they've never actually had to scramble to find someone to watch their kid while they work a double shift." "Your expensive consultants probably have nannies," Evan said without thinking, then immediately wished he could take it back. "Sorry, that was true, and exactly the kind of honest observation I asked for." Lena met his eyes. "Don't apologize for seeing clearly, Evan. It's one of the things I value most about you." They spent another hour touring the facility, with Evan and Mia offering observations about everything from the break room layout to the way meeting rooms were scheduled. Lena listened to all of it, taking notes, asking follow-up questions, treating their perspectives with the same seriousness she probably gave board presentations. Finally, they reached a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Lena had set up a presentation screen and arranged chairs in a small semicircle. "I thought this might be a good place for Mia to share her solar system project," she said. "If you're still willing." Mia's eyes went wide. "Really? The big screen?" "Really. I invited a few people who I thought might be interested. Is that okay?" Before Mia could answer, the door opened and a handful of employees filed in. Young and old, all with expressions of genuine curiosity rather than obligation. One woman had a daughter around Mia's age with her, and the girl immediately gravitated toward Mia with the easy friendship of children. "Hi, I'm Sophie. Is that your planet project?" "Yeah, want to help me present it?" And just like that, Mia's nervousness evaporated. Evan watched his daughter arrange her planets with Sophie's help, the two girls chattering about Saturn's rings and Jupiter's storms like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. The presentation was everything Evan could have hoped for, and more. Mia explained each planet with enthusiasm and surprising depth, referencing facts she'd learned and observations she'd made. Sophie chimed in occasionally, and the adults asked questions that were genuine rather than patronizing. Lena sat next to Evan, and at some point during the presentation, her hand found his, their fingers intertwining in a way that felt both natural and significant. When Mia finished, the room burst into applause. She beamed, taking an elaborate bow that made everyone laugh. Sophie's mother approached Evan afterward. "Your daughter is wonderful. Sophie would love to have a playdate sometime if you're interested. She doesn't meet a lot of other kids who are as passionate about science." Evan found himself exchanging contact information, making plans, participating in the kind of normal parent interaction he rarely got to experience. And all the while, Lena watched with an expression he couldn't quite read but that made his heart beat faster. After the presentation wound down and the conference room emptied, it was just the three of them again. Mia was showing Sophie's mother's business card to Lena with excitement. "I made a friend. A real friend who likes space." "You did, and you gave an excellent presentation. Very professional." Lena smiled at her, then glanced at Evan. "There's one more thing I wanted to show you both, if you have time." She led them to a corner office with a view that probably cost more than Evan made in a year. The desk was massive, the shelves lined with awards and photos. But what caught Evan's attention was the drawing on the wall behind her desk, carefully framed. Saturn with rainbow rings, the picture Mia had given her at the coffee shop. "You actually hung it up," he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't know how to name. "I told Mia I would. I don't break promises to children." Lena gestured to the office. "This is where I spend most of my time when I'm not in meetings. It's very professional, very serious. But that drawing reminds me that there are more important things than quarterly earnings, that curiosity and wonder matter, that the way we see the world when we're young is worth preserving." Mia walked over to the frame, touching it gently. "It looks different in a frame, more important." "It is important. You're important, Mia, and your perspective matters not just to me, but to this whole company." The observations you and your dad made today are going to change how we think about supporting families. That's significant. Evan felt his throat tighten. This woman, this successful CEO with her corner office and her awards and her life that should have nothing to do with theirs, was making his daughter feel valued, was treating both of them like they mattered beyond the immediate moment, like their presence in her world was more than charity or curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" Evan said quietly, while Mia explored the office, examining the view from different angles. "Why are you doing this? Really doing this, I mean. It can't just be about work-life balance policies." Lena was quiet for a moment, watching Mia. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I told you I've been lonely. That's true. But it's more than that. I've spent my entire adult life building this company, proving I belonged in rooms where people didn't think women should be, and I succeeded. I have everything I thought I wanted. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be a person instead of a CEO. I forgot that success without connection is just hollow." She turned to face him fully. "You and Mia reminded me what it feels like to be seen as a person instead of a position, to have conversations that aren't about leveraging advantages or maximizing efficiency, to care about something beyond the next milestone. I'm doing this because being around you makes me want to be better, not more successful, just better." The vulnerability in her admission took Evan's breath away. Here was this powerful woman, admitting that she needed them as much as they were beginning to need her. That this wasn't rescue or charity, but mutual recognition of something they'd all been missing. Before he could respond, Mia returned to them, her expression serious. "Lena, can I ask you something important?" "Of course." "Are you going to keep being friends with me and Daddy? Because it would be really sad if you stopped. We like you a lot." Lena crouched down, eye level with Mia. "I like you both a lot too. And yes, I'm going to keep being your friend, for as long as you want me to be." "Good. Because Daddy's been different since he met you. Happier different. And I think you've been different too. In a good way." Mia glanced between them with the knowing look of children who see more than adults realize. "You fit together, like puzzle pieces that didn't know they were missing their match." Evan wanted to tell his daughter not to get ahead of herself, not to assume things that might not come true, but the words wouldn't come. Because she wasn't wrong. Whatever this was between him and Lena, it felt inevitable in a way nothing in his life had felt for years. They had lunch in Lena's office. Sandwiches she'd had delivered, nothing fancy, just food shared in comfortable space. Mia sat in Lena's desk chair, spinning slowly while she ate, asking questions about what it was like to be in charge of so many people. "It's a lot of responsibility," Lena admitted. "Every decision I make affects not just the company, but all the people who work here and their families. That's 200 employees plus their partners and children. Sometimes the weight of that is overwhelming." "Like how Daddy says every choice he makes about me is huge because he's the only one choosing?" Mia asked. "Exactly like that. The stakes feel impossibly high because we care so much about getting it right." "But you're not the only one choosing anymore," Mia pointed out. "You have Daddy and me now. We can help you choose, just like you're helping us." The simple wisdom of it made Evan's eyes sting. His daughter, his brilliant, perceptive daughter, was already weaving Lena into their lives like she'd always been there, already assuming a future where they helped each other navigate challenges instead of struggling alone. Later, as they prepared to leave, Lena walked them to the elevator. At the last moment before the doors closed, she caught Evan's hand. "Can I take you both to dinner? Not tonight, but soon. Somewhere nice. I want to do this properly." "Do what properly?" Evan asked, though he thought he knew. "Whatever this is becoming, you, me, Mia, I want to acknowledge that it's real, that it matters, that I'm choosing to make space for it in my life." She squeezed his hand. "Is that okay?" Evan looked down at Mia, who was nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah," he managed. "Yeah, that's more than okay." The following Wednesday, Lena texted him an address and a time. When Evan looked up the restaurant, his stomach dropped. It was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance, the kind where dinner for 3 would cost more than he made in a week. He called her immediately. "Lena, I can't afford this. I appreciate the gesture, but—" "You're not paying," she interrupted gently. "I'm taking you both out. Please let me do this, Evan. Let me show you that you're worth celebrating. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a place like that. Do you have a clean shirt?" Yes. Then you have something appropriate. Evan, they care about reservations and behavior, not brand names. You'll be fine. Mia will be fine. I promise. He almost argued further, but stopped himself. This mattered to her, and he was beginning to understand that letting her do things for them wasn't about charity. It was about allowing her to express care in the ways she knew how, the same way he'd let her pay for his meal that first night. Okay, thank you for all of this. You're welcome. And Evan? I'm looking forward to it. To being seen in public with you both. To claiming this, whatever it is, instead of hiding it. Friday night found them back in the financial district, this time at a restaurant that made Giovanni's look casual by comparison. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, servers who moved with choreographed precision. Evan's nerves were screaming at him to run, but Mia's hand in his kept him grounded. Lena was already there, stunning, in a simple black dress that probably cost more than his rent. But when she saw them, her face lit up with such genuine warmth that the expensive clothes didn't matter. You look beautiful, Evan said, the words escaping before he could second-guess them. So do you, both of you. She hugged Mia, then, after a moment's hesitation, kissed Evan's cheek in greeting. The simple gesture felt monumental, an acknowledgement of intimacy in public space. Dinner was magnificent in ways Evan had never experienced. Courses arrived like small works of art, each one explained by servers who seemed to genuinely care about the food they were serving. Mia was fascinated by everything, asking questions about how dishes were prepared, what ingredients were used, whether the chef liked making beautiful food. I think this might be the best thing I've ever eaten, Evan admitted during the main course. A piece of fish so perfectly cooked it nearly dissolved on his tongue. Better than Giovanni's? Lena asked with a small smile. Different. Giovanni's will always be special because of what it meant. But this... He gestured at the table, at her, at Mia's delighted expression as she tried something new. This is special too. All of it. Halfway through dessert, Lena reached across the table and took his hand. Not hiding it, not making it subtle. A clear statement to anyone watching that this mattered, that he mattered. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice steady but carrying weight. And I need you to really hear it, okay? Evan nodded, his heart racing. I know we haven't known each other long. I know your life is complicated and mine is demanding, and there are 1,000 logical reasons why this shouldn't work. But I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you, choosing Mia, choosing to make room in my carefully controlled life for something messy and uncertain and real. She paused, her eyes searching his. I'm falling for you, Evan. Both of you. And I need to know if that's something you want. If I'm someone you want. Because if not, I need to know now before this gets any deeper. The restaurant noise faded to nothing. Mia had stopped eating, watching them both with wide eyes. Evan's throat was tight with emotions too big for words, but he forced them out anyway. I'm terrified, he admitted. I'm terrified of needing you and having you realize I'm not worth the effort. I'm terrified of Mia getting attached and you disappearing. I'm terrified that I have nothing to offer you except problems and complications and a life that doesn't look anything like yours. He took a shaky breath. But I'm more terrified of saying no. Of pushing away the first real thing I've felt in 6 years because I'm too scared to believe I deserve it. So yes, I want this. Whatever this is, however it looks, I want it. Lena's smile was radiant. Then we'll figure it out. Together. All three of us. Mia, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean you're Daddy's girlfriend now? Lena laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. Would that be okay with you? Yes, but you should know that being part of our family means you have to help with my homework sometimes and watch space documentaries even when they're boring and eat peanut butter sandwiches when we can't afford anything else. I think I can handle that, Lena said seriously. And you should know that being part of my life means sometimes having to attend boring business dinners and dealing with me when I'm stressed about work and understanding that I'm learning how to do this as I go. We're all learning, Evan said softly. That's what makes it real. They finished dessert in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When they left the restaurant, Lena's hand found Evan's naturally, and Mia walked between them, holding both their hands, already building bridges between their separate lives. On the sidewalk outside, while they waited for Lena's car, Mia looked up at both of them with that serious expression she got when processing something important. "I think we're going to be okay," she announced. "The three of us. Different than we were, but better different." And standing there in the November cold, holding hands with a woman who'd chosen to see him and a daughter who'd taught him that hope was worth the risk, Evan Brooks finally believed it might be true. The weeks that followed transformed into months, and the rhythm of their lives shifted to accommodate each other in ways that felt both deliberate and inevitable. Lena started keeping spare clothes at Evan's apartment, practical things like jeans and sweaters that could survive a 7-year-old's sticky fingers. Evan found himself with a key to Lena's place, a waterfront condo that initially intimidated him, but gradually became a space where he could breathe differently, where the weight of constant financial pressure lifted just enough to remind him what ease felt like. But it wasn't seamless. Real things never were. The first real argument came in February, 3 months after that dinner where they'd made their relationship official. Evan had picked up extra shifts, both at the construction site and cleaning offices at night, trying to save money for Mia's birthday in March. He'd been exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep a night, and he'd snapped at Lena when she'd suggested paying for Mia's party. "I can handle my daughter's birthday," he'd said, his voice sharper than he'd intended. "I don't need you to fix everything with your checkbook." They were in his apartment, Mia asleep in the bedroom, and Lena's face had gone very still. "That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it? Every time there's a problem, you throw money at it. Mia needs new shoes, you buy them. The heat goes out, you call your building guy to fix it. I'm starting to feel like a project you're managing instead of a partner you're respecting. And I'm starting to feel like you'd rather exhaust yourself than accept help from someone who cares about you." Lena's voice was tight with frustration. "This isn't about control, Evan. It's about having resources and wanting to share them with people I love. But you're so determined to prove you don't need anything from anyone that you can't see the difference between charity and partnership." The word love hung between them, the first time either of them had said it directly. But Evan was too tired, too defensive to acknowledge it properly. "Partnership means I get to contribute equally. What do I bring to this relationship besides problems? You bring yourself. You bring Mia. You bring honesty and perspective and the reminder that there's more to life than quarterly earnings." Lena's composure cracked slightly. "You bring the first real connection I've had in years, but apparently that's not enough for you to believe you deserve to be here." The accusation landed hard because it was true. Evan did feel like he needed to earn his place in her life, did feel like being with him was a net negative in her world, did wake up some mornings wondering when she'd realize she could do better. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the fight draining out of him. "You're right. I'm making this about my insecurity instead of about us building something together." Lena moved closer, her hand finding his. "I don't need you to match my salary, Evan. I need you to let me share what I have without treating it like an insult. When Mia needed shoes, buying them wasn't about proving you couldn't provide. It was about loving a little girl and wanting her feet not to hurt. When your heat went out, fixing it wasn't about showing off my resources. It was about not wanting you both to freeze in February. Can you understand that?" He could, or he was trying to. The months with Lena were teaching him uncomfortable truths about his own pride, about how the years of struggle had made him rigid about accepting help, about how his determination to never be a burden had isolated him from the very support that might make life sustainable. "I'm still learning how to do this," he admitted. "How to let someone care without feeling like I'm taking advantage." "Then learn. I'll be patient while you do. But Evan, you have to actually try. You have to let me in, even when it's uncomfortable." She paused, then added softly, "I love you. I need you to believe that's real, that it's not conditional on you being financially independent or perfectly self-sufficient. I love you because of who you are, including the parts that are struggling." "I love you too." The words felt massive, terrifying, liberating. "I'm just scared of what happens when loving me becomes inconvenient." "Then I guess we'll find out together. But I'm not going anywhere, Evan. Not when things get hard, not when you're exhausted and defensive. Not when your pride makes you push me away. I'm staying." They worked through it, slowly and imperfectly. Evan tried to accept help with more grace. Lena tried to ask before solving problems, to give him space to struggle when struggle was what he needed. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and honesty turned out to be the foundation they could build on. By spring, their lives had woven together enough that untangling them would have required deliberate effort. Mia spent weekends at Lena's condo, her space-themed drawings gradually covering the previously minimalist walls. Lena attended parent-teacher conferences and school events, sitting next to Evan and taking notes about Mia's progress, like she'd always been there. Evan started having dinner with Lena's parents. Awkward at first, their initial skepticism about their daughter dating a construction worker obvious, but gradually warming as they saw how Lena had softened, how she smiled more, how she'd started leaving work at reasonable hours to have dinner with her chosen family. The transformation in Lena's company was visible too. The childcare center was completely redesigned based on Evan and Mia's observations, and usage tripled within 2 months. Lena started a program for employees with non-traditional family structures, offering flexible schedules and support systems that acknowledged real life was complicated. She cited Evan in board meetings, not by name, but his insights about what working parents actually needed shaped policy in ways that made the company stronger. "You're changing my world," she told him one night in May. They were at her place, Mia asleep in the guest room that had gradually become her room, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Not just personally, professionally too. The company's employee satisfaction scores are higher than they've ever been because we're finally focusing on things that matter. "I didn't do anything except point out the obvious," Evan protested. "You saw what we were missing. That's everything." Lena curled against him on the couch, her head on his shoulder. "I got a call today from a headhunter, major tech company in San Francisco, offering me a position that would double my salary and put me in charge of their entire healthcare division." Evan's stomach dropped. San Francisco, 3,000 miles away. The end of this fragile thing they'd built. "What did you say?" His voice came out carefully neutral. "I said no." Lena lifted her head to look at him. "I didn't even have to think about it. 5 years ago, I would have been on a plane the next day. The money, the prestige, the opportunity, it would have been everything I thought I wanted. But now I have everything I actually want, here, with you and Mia. Lena, you can't turn down opportunities like that for us. What if you regret it?" "I won't. And even if I did, that would be my choice to make." She took his hand. "Evan, you need to understand something. You and Mia aren't holding me back. You're the reason I finally understand what success actually means. It's not corner offices or salary increases. It's having people you love to come home to. It's building a life that matters beyond quarterly reports. You've given me that. Why would I trade it for more money?" The certainty in her voice made something in Evan's chest unclench. Maybe she really meant it. Maybe this wasn't temporary. But the universe had one more test for them. In June, Evan's construction company landed a major contract in Portland, Maine, a year-long project that would pay significantly better than his current work, but require relocating for the duration. It was the kind of opportunity that could change his financial situation completely, build real savings, maybe even get him into a position where he didn't have to work multiple jobs just to survive. He sat at Lena's dining table with the offer letter in front of him, doing the math in his head. A year in Portland, a year away from Boston, from Rachel, from the life he'd built, from Lena. "You should take it," Lena said when he showed her the offer. She'd gone very still, reading the details carefully. "This is a game changer for you financially." "It's in Portland, for a year." "I know, but Evan, this is your future, Mia's future. You can't turn this down because of me." "You turned down San Francisco for us." "That's different. I have options. You don't have the luxury of saying no to opportunities that could fundamentally change your situation." Lena's voice was steady, but he could see the effort it took. "I love you, which means I want what's best for you and Mia, even if it's hard for me. What if what's best is staying here, with you? Then you need to be sure, really sure, because I don't want you resenting me in 5 years when you're still struggling financially and wondering what might have been different." They spent 3 days talking through scenarios, working through possibilities, trying to find solutions that didn't require sacrifice from either of them. Rachel offered to keep Mia in Boston so she wouldn't have to change schools. Lena suggested she could visit on weekends, make the drive, maintain the connection. Evan calculated budgets and timelines, trying to figure out if the year apart was worth the financial stability it might provide. But every scenario felt wrong. Every solution required someone giving up something essential. On the fourth day, Mia resolved it with the clarity that only children possess. "I don't want to live without Lena for a year," she announced over breakfast at Evan's apartment. "And I don't want Daddy to go away. We're a family now. Families stay together." "It's not that simple, sweetheart," Evan started, but Mia cut him off. "Why not? Lena has money. Daddy needs money. We all love each other. Why can't Lena just help until Daddy finds a good job here?" She looked between them with exasperation. "You're both so worried about who's giving what that you're forgetting the point is being together." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Evan looked at Lena, saw his own revelation reflected in her eyes. "She's right," Lena said softly. "We've been so focused on equality and independence that we're missing the actual solution, which is that I have resources I don't need, and you need resources to build the stability you want. Why are we treating that like a problem instead of an opportunity? Because I don't want to be someone you support financially. I want to be a partner." "You are a partner. Money isn't the only currency of partnership, Evan. You bring perspective to my company that's made it better. You make me a better person. You've given me a family. Those things have value that can't be measured in dollars." Lena reached for his hand. "What if we stopped keeping score? What if we just pooled resources and built the life we want together?" It went against everything Evan had told himself about not being a burden, about maintaining his independence, about proving his worth through financial contribution. But Mia was right. He was so busy protecting his pride that he was sabotaging the family they'd built. "I could turn down Portland," he said slowly. "Use the time I would have spent there to look for better work here. Maybe take some courses, get certified in something that pays more than construction. But that would mean less income short-term while I retrained. I can cover that. Gladly. We move in together properly, split one rent instead of two. You go back to school or whatever training you need. When you're in a better position, you contribute more. And we stop treating it like some competition to prove who needs who less." Lena's voice was firm. "I love you. I want to build a life with you. That means sometimes I carry more weight, and sometimes you do. And we trust each other enough to let it balance over time instead of demanding perfect equality in every moment." Evan felt tears burning behind his eyes. Accepting this meant admitting he couldn't do it all alone, meant acknowledging that pride was less important than family, meant trusting that Lena wouldn't hold this over him or use it as leverage later. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's do it. Let's actually build this together instead of trying to prove we don't need each other." Mia cheered, launching herself at both of them in a tackle hug that knocked Evan back in his chair and made Lena laugh. By August, they'd moved into a new place together, not Lena's expensive condo or Evan's cramped apartment, but something in between. A 3-bedroom in Somerville with a small yard where Mia could play and enough space for all of them to have privacy when they needed it. Evan had enrolled in a certification program for project management, using his construction experience as foundation, but building toward work that paid better and didn't destroy his body. Lena had adjusted her schedule to be home for family dinners most nights. Rachel cried the first time she visited them, seeing Evan relaxed in a way he hadn't been in years. "You look happy," she said, hugging him tight. "Really happy, not pretending happy." "I am. It's terrifying, but I am." "You deserve it, Evan. You always did. I'm glad you finally believe that." The certification program was harder than Evan expected, pushing him in ways that physical labor never had. He struggled with some of the coursework, spent late nights studying while Lena helped quiz him, and Mia brought him encouraging drawings. But for the first time in 6 years, he felt like he was building toward something instead of just surviving. In October, Lena came home with news that made her eyes bright with excitement. "I had an interesting conversation today with our head of operations. He's retiring next year, and the board is starting succession planning." She set her bag down, pulled off her coat. "They asked if I had recommendations for his replacement." "And?" Evan was helping Mia with homework at the kitchen table. "I recommended someone with non-traditional experience, someone who understands the practical side of how businesses operate, who has managed complex logistics under pressure, who knows how to lead teams through difficult situations." Lena smiled. I recommended you. Or rather, I recommended that we create a position for you once you finish your certification. Operations coordinator to start, with a clear path to director level. Evan stared at her. Lena, I haven't even finished the program. I've never worked in corporate anything. I can't just walk into your company. Yes, you can, because you're qualified. Your military background, your years managing construction projects, your ability to see what others miss, all of that translates to operations work. And frankly, you understand how actual work happens better than most people with MBAs. She sat down across from him. I'm not handing you a job because we're together. I'm offering you an opportunity because you're genuinely good at what you do, and my company would benefit from having you. People will say I got the job because I'm sleeping with the CEO. Let them. I don't care what people say. I care about making good business decisions, and hiring you is a good business decision. Lena's voice was matter of fact. But it's your choice. If you'd rather find something elsewhere, I understand. I just wanted you to know the option exists. Mia looked up from her homework. You should take it, Daddy. Then you can work with Lena and help make the company better like you already do, but official. From the mouths of babes. Again, Evan took the position, starting part-time in November while he finished his certification. The whispers about nepotism lasted about 2 weeks before his actual competence became obvious. He reorganized their supply chain logistics, saving the company 6 figures in the first quarter. He implemented new safety protocols based on his construction experience. He spoke to employees in language they actually understood instead of corporate jargon, and morale in operations improved measurably. By December, 1 year after that terrible blind date at Giovanni's, Evan had a career instead of just jobs. He had a family instead of just survival. He had a future that felt possible instead of predetermined by circumstance. On Christmas Eve, the 3 of them went back to Giovanni's for dinner. The same restaurant where it had all started, where Evan had sat alone and humiliated and convinced he deserved nothing better. But this time he walked in holding Lena's hand, with Mia between them chattering about the telescope Santa might bring her. Their server was the same woman who'd been kind to him that November night. She recognized Evan immediately, her face lighting up with recognition and something like delight. I remember you, she said warmly. You sat alone. And you... She turned to Lena. You paid for his meal. I wondered what happened after that night. This happened, Lena said simply, gesturing to the 3 of them. Turns out kindness has consequences. The woman's eyes went bright with tears. That's the best thing I've heard all week. I'm so happy for all of you. They ate dinner at the same table by the window where Evan had waited for someone who never came. But this time, he was surrounded by people who'd chosen to be there, who'd chosen him, who'd built something real out of a moment of grace. After dessert, while Mia was distracted with her coloring book that the restaurant had thoughtfully provided, Lena reached across the table and took Evan's hand. I have something for you, she said, pulling a small envelope from her purse. It's not exactly a Christmas present, more like a statement of intent. Evan opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a document, official-looking, stamped and notarized. It took him a moment to understand what he was reading. You're adding Mia to your life insurance as a beneficiary? I'm making her my dependent. Legally, on paper, she's my family, now. If anything happens to me, she'll be provided for, same as if anything happens to you. We've built in protections so she's never vulnerable again. Lena's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. I know we're not married, and I know legally I'm not her parent, but in every way that matters, she's my daughter too. I wanted that recognized, officially. Evan's vision blurred. This woman, this incredible woman, had looked at his daughter and decided she was worth protecting, worth claiming, worth building a future around. Lena, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me keep loving you both. Say you'll stop questioning whether you deserve this. Say you'll build this life with me for real, not just until your situation improves, but permanently. She squeezed his hand. I'm all in, Evan. I need to know you are too. I am. I have been since that first conversation, I think. I was just too scared to admit it. Mia, who'd been pretending to color but clearly listening, looked up with a grin. Does this mean Lena is like my bonus mom now? If that's okay with you, Lena said carefully. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Mia abandoned her coloring to climb into Lena's lap, hugging her tight. I love you, Lena. You make our family complete. And there it was. The word that had terrified Evan for so long, but now felt like the only word that fit. Family. Not broken or incomplete or temporary, just family. They walked home through Boston Common, the December cold crisp and clear, the Christmas lights strung through the trees, creating a canopy of warmth above them. Mia ran ahead, chasing the illuminated reindeer displays, her laughter carrying back to them on the winter air. Do you ever think about that night? Evan asked, his arm around Lena's waist, her head on his shoulder. About how differently things could have gone. All the time. I think about what would have happened if I'd looked away instead of noticing you, if I'd decided your pain wasn't my business, if I'd let the opportunity for connection pass because it was easier than getting involved. Lena stopped walking, turned to face him fully. I think about how close I came to missing this. Missing you, missing Mia, missing the life we've built. And it terrifies me. Me too. I almost didn't show up that night, you know? Almost canceled the whole thing because I was so convinced it would be a disaster. It was a disaster, just not the kind you expected. No, it turned out to be the best disaster of my life. Evan kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and certain. Thank you. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For staying when I gave you reasons to leave. For choosing us when you had every option in the world. Thank you for letting me in. For trusting that I meant it. For being brave enough to build something new instead of protecting yourself from hurt. Lena smiled. We're good together, Evan. Different than either of us expected, but good. Mia came running back, grabbing both their hands. Come on, they're doing a light show by the fountain. They let her pull them forward. This child who'd taught them both what mattered, who'd seen past their fears to the family they could become. And as they stood together watching colored lights dance across water, three people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build toward light, Evan finally understood what Lena had tried to tell him that first night. You matter. Not because of what you achieve or what you provide, or how perfectly you manage to hold yourself together. Just because you exist. Because you're human. Because someone decided you were worth seeing. 2 years later, on a November evening much like the one where this all began, Evan proposed to Lena at Giovanni's. The same table, the same restaurant, but a completely different story. She said yes before he'd finished asking, and Mia, now 9 and somehow even more perceptive, cheered loud enough that the entire restaurant turned to look. They married in the spring, a small ceremony in the Boston Public Garden with Mia as flower girl and Rachel crying happy tears, and Lena's parents beaming with genuine affection for the family their daughter had built. At the reception, Evan gave a toast. 3 years ago, I came to a restaurant thinking I was looking for romance. Turned out I was looking for something much more important. I was looking for someone who would see me when I felt invisible. Someone who would remind me that I mattered, that my daughter and I deserved kindness, that struggling didn't make us broken. He raised his glass to Lena. I found that person. And she didn't just change my life. She taught me that I deserved a life worth living. That accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. That love isn't about keeping score or proving worth. It's about showing up for each other, over and over, in all the messy, imperfect, beautiful ways that make us human. Lena was crying, something she rarely did in public. Mia was holding both their hands, anchoring them together. To family, Evan finished. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose. The one we build from kindness and courage and the revolutionary act of letting ourselves be seen. The reception carried on around them, but at their table, the same configuration that had haunted Evan's nightmares and dreams, 2 chairs and hope. 3 people sat together and knew exactly what they'd found. Not rescue, not salvation, just what happens when someone extends grace to a stranger, when that stranger is brave enough to accept it, and when both of them choose to keep showing up for the family they're building. Mia would grow up knowing she was loved not just by a father who'd moved mountains for her, but by a bonus mother who'd chosen her deliberately, who'd looked at a struggling single parent and his brilliant daughter and decided they were worth disrupting a perfectly ordered life for. Evan would spend the rest of his life working at Sterling Innovations, eventually becoming COO. transforming the company with the same practical wisdom he'd brought to every challenge. His insights about real work, real families, real struggles would shape policy in ways that affected thousands of employees. And Lena would finally understand that success wasn't measured in quarterly earnings or corner offices or accolades from industry publications. It was measured in family dinners and homework help and Saturday mornings with people who loved you not for what you provided, but for who you were. Years later, when Mia was in college studying astrophysics and interviewing for NASA internships, she'd tell the story of how her parents met, about the worst blind date in history that turned into the best thing that ever happened to her family, about the woman who'd looked at a broken man and seen someone worth helping, about the man who'd been brave enough to let himself be helped, about the child who'd known before either of them that they belonged together. But that November night at Giovanni's, when Evan sat alone and humiliated and convinced he deserved nothing better, none of them knew what was coming. They just knew that in a world increasingly defined by cruelty and indifference, someone had chosen kindness. And that kindness, freely given and gratefully received, had rewritten all their stories. Sometimes the best things in life start with the worst moments. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you've stopped believing anyone is looking. Sometimes all it takes is one person deciding you matter and another person being brave enough to believe them. Evan Brooks had walked into Giovanni's with $50 and crushing loneliness. He'd walked out with hope, with connection, with the first threads of a family that would define the rest of his life. Not because of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but because someone had seen him when he felt invisible, and he'd let himself be seen. That was all it took. That was everything it took. And it was more than enough.